fireside chat on women in leadership, retaining, mentoring, and elevating talent.
Hi, very good afternoon to all of you. And it's a pleasure chatting with Apurva. I guess this is a very intensive topic and it's very close to all our hearts. So I'd like to begin by asking a few questions to Apurva. Apurva, you've been a top performer yourself, but if you look at the statistics, hardly 1% of the women have made it to the CEO or the directorship positions, right? So in your tenure, what have you gathered as challenges that women face to really reach where they would have desired to reach in their corporate career?
Thanks, Lalita, and there'll be a question coming back for you shortly, sure. So be prepared. I think there are internal and external challenges, right? So if you talk about the external challenges, this room knows it better than everything else, anybody else. That if you look around, the default gender of leadership is still male. 95% of any panels, 95% of any boards, 95% of any senior leadership roles, be it in political spaces or in the corporate world, are filled by men. And as a consequence, women just find themselves as a minority. When they look around, they see only males everywhere in the room, and they find it so much more difficult to get out of their shell. Equally, when you look at the organizations themselves and leaders who are men, they find it very difficult to say that I can be replaced or succeeded by a female. A male CEO will always look for a male COO. A male CEO in his succession planning will never think that I should look for a female to take over my role. And as a consequence, women reach a particular level and are not able to grow beyond that. As far as women themselves are concerned, I think they see themselves as a minority. They see themselves having to deal with a lot of social pressures which prevented them from working, including, you know, there are articles that get written about how children of working women don't do as well as children of women who don't work. This is the bias every day she has to face. And to combat that bias really requires a lot of support, a lot of emotional strength, and a lot of undoing even the subconscious biases that we may think about diversity, but do we really implement it? I was talking to an HR head some time ago, and then he said, I'm very pro-diversity. So I said, tell me, how are you so pro-diversity? Just yesterday I had 3 vacancies. I recruited 1 normal and 2 diversity candidates. So, in his mind, normal and diversity candidate. So the moment you keep on telling women that you are diversity, you are different, you are the minority, we are doing you a favor by recruiting you, I think that just keeps on putting more and more pressure on the woman herself. So my simple solve for all this is treat women absolutely in the same manner as you treat men. Easier said than done, but if you think about it, I have made think that the moment you start just thinking of both the genders as 2 professionals who are coming into the room and not apply the gender lens at all, you'll solve a lot of these issues. What do you have to say, Lalita?
No, I think it's an excellent point. I think sometimes, right, when you are specifically called out to say, you know what, I will give you this ahead of time because you're a woman, it actually makes you feel uncomfortable at work. I would have anyway got there by doing hard work. You don't need to give that to me. But I think her point is extremely right that you just need to have a place which is equal for you and a place which tells you that, you know what, you will be taken care if you do equally well. And I've also found when you give these undue privileges to women, it also develops some kind of a unwanted bias in people's mind, saying that, oh, I don't want to recruit women in a particular setup because I will have to accompany them and drop them at home if they work beyond 9 o'clock. Not required, right? I will have to give them flexible working hours. I will have to give them chutti. I won't get them replacement if they go on maternity leave. So I don't want to recruit women. So some of these actually we think are forward-looking practices, but they actually become impediments later when people try to recruit women in their team. So I think it's important to have a balance between the two. In fact, I would say that give paternity leave as much as you give women leave to take care of children, right? So it's important to have that support at home also for the woman. And I think things are changing. I think domestic support is coming automatically and naturally. And I guess that's extremely important. I completely agree with your point. But this is on the corporate side, Apurva. You have traveled a lot to look at various women who are self-help groups. I read about your venture where you're talking about, sourcing stuff from people who would otherwise not be able to sell it at the prices that they deserve it to be sold. So when you meet these self-help groups, when you meet the non-salaried community, right, if I were to call it, what are those kind of challenges and what is it that as a community we are doing to get them over it?
So I think, Lalita, the challenges really remain the same. So I'll just separate out what's happening in, let's say, rural India. One is the social pressure there. I think urban India that way is a little more privileged. People have become, all these forums such as this, people are understanding. Women, especially the younger generation, are far more emboldened. They've been brought up differently. They are no longer willing to, the millennials and Gen Z, they are no longer willing to either get married at the age that they were supposed to get married, have children at the age that they're supposed to have children. They are becoming more and more their own women, right? To a certain extent, because they are seeing more and more role models around them, they are gathering the courage to achieve and reach out for their ambitions. The story is not the same in rural India. The story is not the same in, let us say, a slightly lower socio-economic class. There, the social pressures are still the same as what our mothers faced 20, 30 years ago. You can't leave. Oh, how can you leave your village to go out and work? How can you, think of doing anything beyond what you have been assigned to? What have you been assigned to do? So those challenges still remain, and therefore for us, when we thought about creating employment, was to say, okay, let us address this issue. Okay, they can't leave the village. I can't suddenly start teaching them coding. So let me create employment by making them do what they do very well already. Now, why did we do that? Someone will say, you're just perpetuating another bias. Okay, they're good in cooking, so you are just saying that, okay, I'll buy food products from them. But I strongly feel that the first empowerment above any other empowerment is financial empowerment. We have had women come up to say, now that I've started earning 3,000 rupees and 5,000 rupees because of what we are, buying from them, my mother-in-law has started treating me differently. So the respect that is coming into the house, because now I am an earning member. So somehow or the other, financial empowerment is the stepping stone to women being able to make their own choices. Now, be it by selling the papads they make, that's okay. I think that's how we will really start changing the acceptance, the esteem, the power of women at the grassroots level.
Understood. So now if you look at, again, switching back to corporates, right? I think when you and I would have started our work, we would have had a 3-month maternity leave.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't think we had things like paternity leave, and I don't think my husband got time off to take care of the kids. But I think those things are changing slowly but surely. But I also find that there are corporates who give nutrition allowance and other things, very, very sweet gestures actually. But that takes care of the early stages of, let's say, a marriage or a motherhood. But there are multiple other problems that women deal with. Do you think those are adequately provisioned for in the corporate life? Do you think more needs to be done and recognized? Because see, the fact that there are now more women coming into the corporate force, but they do not rise on top really means that there is leakage, right? And there's leakage because beyond a point you realize that, okay, till now you took care, beyond that you're not able to take care of what I want. So what do you think needs to be done? What are the unprovisioned for or unsolved for problems as women grow into the various positions?
So that's a very valid point that you've raised. Increasingly, because of all these diversity conversations, policies, etc. We've taken care of women in the first 10 years of their working life when they're having small kids, etc., etc. And I think organizations themselves are far more sensitive, whether it's maternity leave or flexi timing or hybrid working, etc., etc. I think what's happening after 10 years, after when women have reached middle management, and I think there are two issues there. One issue is I see so many more middle management women than ever before.
I agree.
Than when both of us were, would have first started. But at that stage, why are they not going up? Because the pipeline and the leakage is the same. 30% women at the bottom, 15% here, and then only 4 or 5% at the top. So there's a 2/3 leakage that's happening from middle management to the top. Where are the 2/3 women going? I think one is they are stagnating at that middle management level. The other is they are leaving the workforce. Now, why are they doing this? Again, one is I think women just get tired. They become, I've become vice president now. I've become CXO now. This is good enough. Why do I have to fight more now to become CEO? They still see it as a battle. Because again, there are 9 CXOs and she's the sole only one. She says, can I compete with these 9 guys to reach that top? Is it even worth it? I think they themselves are giving up. The other issue, and I see this so much, especially, I talk to a lot of senior women. I work with a lot of senior women. And I will ask you this question too. I see that somewhere and I mentioned this earlier, the male leaders in this guise of saying I'm protecting, etc., are not giving the hard jobs to the senior women. Oh my God, this is a sales role. It requires 200 days of traveling. I don't think this woman can do it. So they don't even offer. They don't even check with a woman whether she'll be able to do or willing to do it or not. And I think a lot of women will be willing to do it because they've gone through the hard labor already. Kids are grown up, they've reached a certain level of expertise, but at this stage, they're not getting the top roles because somewhere, again, whether it is subconscious, whether it is conscious, whether it is this feeling that I'm such a great male CEO, I will only get replaced by another great male CEO. I think for that reason, we are not giving the tough jobs to are senior women despite the fact that they may want it. I wonder whether you've seen this happen in your...
No, so actually I have 2 observations in the conversation that you made. One is the fact that women get tired. I feel, and I don't know whether you've observed this, I feel that we tend to overdo things just because we want it to be perfect. And that makes us tired faster than, probably men, because we just don't want to let things be. We feel that we will have to work double as hard to retain what we have got. So I think that's something that only we can overcome. I don't think anybody can do anything about it. So that's one observation that I found as to why we get tired and we drop off. That's one. Second, I think, I guess sales roles are still looked at as roles where you can just take the other guy out for a drink and have a conversation. But, if that was a woman, I would not be able to do that. Right? So I guess there are some roles which are probably not up for women yet. I find very less number of women in tech. I find very less number of women heading fintechs. We find very less number of women in roles which are sales. But yes, those opportunities do matter because then when you grow up, they realize that, you don't have exposure to certain skills which this job requires. Not that you've not done that because you're not capable, but just that you were not thought of when those opportunities were available. Yes, I completely agree with you. But I think what struck me is that this empowerment thing is not just a thing of women who are in the self-help groups or anything like that also, right? If we just hold on to what we are doing, even though we might get tired easier and faster, I think the rewards that we get out of having 2 members earning in the family is really, really very high. Right, so your ability to take care of your parents, to take care of your health. I mean, the longevity of life is improving, but I don't think the quality is improving. So we will need medical facilities. We will need help. We will need our kids to grow. You will need to have connects to get them to where they need to go to. So I think the empowerment or rather support that they provide is something that they should look for in long term and not give up in short term because there's a lot that will accrue. if they just hold on to what they are doing. Am I right?
Correct. And you know, on this point that you made on empowerment, you also touched upon this. See, empowerment, how does empowerment come? Empowerment comes, as I said, firstly, when you are financially independent. When you're financially independent, you naturally are able to, you're more empowered. Now, empowerment is what? Is a matter of choices. And I keep on saying this repeatedly to women that finally, you know, you have to strengthen your muscle of choice. It's like going to the gym. Now, suddenly you can't go and start doing 10 push-ups. You have to start with 1 push-up. And that happens only when you own or take control of your choices. To a large extent, the generation earlier, not so the generation just now, but all the our choices were determined by what our parents decided for us. Where to study, where to stay, what kind of clothes to wear, who to marry, etc., etc. So you've weakened your muscle of choice. As a consequence, as you go ahead in life's journey and there are paths that you have to decide, you externalize it. Either the husband makes the choice or the boss makes the choice, or your children now then
you're okay with it.
And you're okay with it. Whether what should be the temperature in the bedroom of the AC, what food you should eat, etc., etc. So the owning choices, taking control of them, where they may be the tiniest choice. Okay, what will I eat for dinner tonight? How many times, I mean, senior corporate women, how many times do they say, I like this particular dish, I will make it in the evening? No, it doesn't work like that. So you have to keep on strengthening that choice, and then it becomes like a virtuous circle upwards. You make choices, you get empowered. You have financial independence, you get empowered. You have empowerment, you make more and more choices. I think each of us, and that's how we should allow our daughters to grow up, our junior women in our teams to grow up. You have to learn to make your own choice, irrespective of the noise around you.
Got it. Now, coming back to corporate, now this leakage of talent that we're talking about, right? And we've taken care for the first 10 years or so. What are the things that you think that people should do to take care of women not getting tired, or probably getting an equal opportunity to move up on top, taking care of elderly parents? So what are those cycles which you think is really unsolved for?
So I have a slightly ambiguous point of view on this whole hybrid and flexi timing, and you know, which allows for other things to happen in a woman's life. But before I answer, I want to put this question back to you. What do you think? What do you think are the...
No, so I think after childcare, or you know, the first few years, I think a few things that really matter are aging parents is something that's extremely important, and your own health, right? Like I said, I don't think flexibility is going to solve this, like say a work from home or anything like that. And when you give that flexibility, I again feel that there's an unconscious bias which comes. Oh, you know what? They're working from home, they cannot grow, right? So I don't think flexibility is an option, but I think providing for care through medical facilities is an option, right? Providing for, again, I would say, allow men and women who are of a particular age group to take leave for taking care of aged parents. I'm fine, I will take 3 days off in a month, my husband will take 3 days off in a month, right? So, and give them medical care facilities which will probably help me stay away from them or stay at work, and I'll make sure that they are there. So this is a very, very disguised form of incentivization to say, and it's not just for women, right? Everybody's parents need to be taken care, right? So as you get to that, then you will realize that, you know what, there is an incentive for me to come, which is also helping me grow, which is also helping me not to get worried about whom I have at home and what do I need to take care of them. So I think it's important for them to stay put at the same pace, at the same aggression, and not slacken just because there is aging parents who have been to take care of at home, or your own health which needs to be taken care. That's my feeling, Apurva.
So Lalita, I agree with you. I think the recognition, and there has to be a recognition that as we expect women to continue working in a household, there is going to definitely come a pressure, whether it is a pressure of a young child or an aging parent. Okay, through the life journey, now think about it as a household where the husband was out working and the woman was at home, where she could pick up the burden or the nurturing part of the family responsibility, whereas both of them are now outside. So both of them need to be given the space to do the nurturing, both man and woman, in turn need to be given the space to do that nurturing. So work-life balance is oft used, misused, taken advantage of by various people, but work-life integration is something I'm hoping people learned after COVID. That, you know, we are corporate animals, right? We need to put in that effort into our workspaces so we can grow. But we need to equally put in effort into the rest of our lives. And are we recognizing that? And it's a job of both the man and the woman. Are we recognizing that we need to make space for our health, be it emotional health, mental health, physical health? Are we making that space for it? Are we making space for taking care of the other stakeholders? Stakeholders is a word we like to use. Stakeholders of our personal life, which is our parents, our friends, our family. True. So are we making, so work-life integration, if that lesson has not been learned by professionals, HR heads, corporate India, I think it's a travesty.
And I've always felt that women are very good at multitasking. So if they decide and recognize that they will need to take control, I think they will.
Also, and men, I think we should now start saying men are equally good at multitasking. Otherwise, because we keep on saying women are good at multitasking, all the multitasking comes on their head. Oh, yeah. So I want to now say men, you are also equally good at multitasking.